Running commands. Look, if you can run ipconfig or ping, then you can use Windows PowerShell, but it is a little bit picky about its syntax, and there's a few things you need to know that'll just kind of help you avoid the bigger gotchas, get you productive quickly, and that's what we'll cover in this nugget. This nugget may seem a little repetitive. We're going to be talking about some of the same things that we talked about in previous nuggets, things like getting the syntax right, using aliases. But I'm also going to introduce some new things like using parameter shortcuts and give you some tips for running external commands. More importantly, I'm really going to focus on gotchas because this entire nugget is really about getting the syntax right. And by focusing on some of the things that people commonly mess up as they're getting started, I hope I can kind of circumvent that for you and keep you from falling into those speed bumps. Okay, we will start, as usual, with PowerShell version 2 running in Windows 7. And we're actually going to spend most of our time in this window, I think, because there's not really much of this that changes through the different versions of PowerShell. And this is really all about the whole process, the things we've talked about in the last 2 or 3 nuggets, kind of coming together and using them all and making sure that we're getting it right. So let's start with a task. I need to get a list of running processes on the computer. Okay, help. Now, I know I showed you get command, but almost out of habit, I tend to look for help first. You don't have to do that. You can use get command, and I'm going to try and show you both ways here, but I usually start with this. This is not a misspelling either. When I do these things with the wildcard trick, I tend to use a truncated version. I get a bigger hit list back, meaning I get more results in the list, but that's okay. I'd rather scan that than take the risk of missing the one that I wanted. So we'll run that. Oh, that's not too bad. So to get a list of processes, it's get process. Could have done this instead. I might have narrowed it down to the noun get to begin with if I'm using get command, because I know I want to get a list, and that's what the get verb is all about. And then I might have done that for the verb. I might have also done this. Keep in mind that different modules add a prefix on the front of their noun, right? So if you do this, you're looking for an unprefixed something that starts with PROC. I don't know up front that what I want is going to have a prefix or not. So keeping that asterisk on the front can help just, again, make sure that you're finding what you need. Oh, and I got nothing. So you have to wonder why that happened, right? And it's because I consistently refer to get as a noun. Don't know why. I guess that's a good lesson, though. You know, if you type something and you get no results, sit back and really look at what you typed and make sure that's really what you meant. There we go, get process. Okay, let's take a look at the help for that. Just the basic syntax help will do right now. Gets the processes that are running on the local computer or a remote computer. That's interesting. We might try that. In fact, I'm just going to duck out and make sure my other virtual machines are running. Hang on a sec. Where did I put Hyper-V Manager? There it is. Yeah, so we're on client right now. Actually, we're on Windows 7 right now. Client's the Windows 8 machine. Looks like member and DC are running. Those are the two that are in the same domain with me, so we can play with those. I've really no idea. Those are pretty fresh installs. No idea what kind of situation we're running into with the firewall on those. So we'll try it and see. And you know what? Let's go ahead and run this command. The command name is get process. I'm going to use tab completion so that it completes the command name. No chance of me getting it wrong that way. I will provide. See, it does not look to me like any of these are mandatory parameters. So one of the ways that this thing works is the first parameter set is usually your default parameter set, right? So that means I'm working with this one by default. So if I don't specify a parameter like ID or input object that's going to drag me into the second or third parameter set, then I'm in the first one. So I'm not going to specify those, so we'll just take those off the board. Considering the first parameter set, optional, and I can tell because the whole thing, including its value, is contained within square brackets. Optional, 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 optional. So it looks like I should just be able to run this thing with absolutely no parameters whatsoever, and in theory, it should work. So let's try that. Yeah, get process, and it ran. That's perfect. So now let's try it with get process minus name. Let's just get everything that starts with S. Cool. So that works. Let's try this on a different computer. Now again, this may very well blow up because I have no idea what the firewall on this machine is configured to look like. Yeah, and it looks like it's going to time out on me. Well, that's cool. When we come to working with network stuff, that'll give us something to play with. We can reconfigure the network on that puppy, or reconfigure the firewall. Yeah, it looks like he's not getting there. Nope, there's the error. Couldn't connect to local machine. Well, that's okay. That's good. And in fact, I'm going to show you a little trick right now. I have a lot of students who do not like the error message text. It's this red on black. It kind of makes me think of my high school English, because this is what my essays looked like. They were covered in red text from where the teacher marked it up. It's also kind of low contrast. It actually can be a little bit difficult to read. I'll get into classrooms sometimes, and you really can't see that on the projector. Here's a little trick. Private data. This is a secret. You're not supposed to know about this. Error background color or foreground color. Isn't that nice? Now you feel like you did something right because it's green. But it's also easier to read. And it's just so much more important that you be able to read these and not just see a blob of text on the screen. There's useful information in the errors. So, okay, we got that done. Let's go back to get process. Help get process. Now I want to play with one of these other parameter sets. So let's run this again, get process, and I want to grab an ID out of here that I can play with. 2652. Get process ID 2652. Okay, that worked. Now, a gotcha here, again, something people will do is they'll do like conhost. Now you see that's got a dash in front of it, and that's no good. There is no parameter named conhost. One of the reasons folks will start making this mistake is, and you know, I'm actually going to pull up the ISE so that I can type all these out for you. Here's the proper way to use the command. Get process name conhost, or get process ID 2634, whatever that ID number was. I don't really care. But remember that if you look at the help on this, name is a positional parameter. Now, these square brackets tell me it's optional, but these square brackets tell me that it is positional. And if you have any doubt of that, you can look at the full help instead. And if we get down to the name, it says name lives in position 1. So that means this is also legitimate, right? It's the name going into the first position. So I don't actually have to type minus name. I can just type the string that goes into it. And so long as that string is in the first position, I'm good to go. But what if, what was that ID number again? 2652. Okay, we're going to put that in here. 2652. What if I do this? Get process 2652. What's it going to do? Didn't work. Read the error message. Cannot find a process with the name 2652. Well, I know that's not the name. It's the ID. And look, if I look at the help here, where'd the help go? If I look at the help, it's telling me that ID is in the first position too. Yeah, no it isn't. Look, pay real close attention to this because it's probably the biggest gotcha. ID is listed first, but the word minus ID is not in square brackets. Therefore, this is not a positional parameter. And if you took the time to look at the full help, and if you get the sense that I'm emphasizing the full help a lot, you're right, I am. It is a named parameter. It is not positional. If you're going to use ID, you have to type ID. You can only omit the parameter name if the position has a number in it, and then you must provide the value in that position. ID doesn't do that. ID says named. So when you feed it just something in the first position, this parameter is attaching that to the name, or this commandlet is attaching that to the name parameter, right? If I insisted that that be taken as an ID, I got to type ID. So that's one of the first gotchas people will make. Just because one parameter set defines a positional parameter does not mean any of the other parameter sets define a positional parameter. All right, so this is legal. Now here's what people will do, and this is wrong. Do you see where they're coming up with that though? It's because here they didn't have to type a parameter at all. Here they typed a parameter and they know that parameters start with a minus. So in their heads, they just kind of merge those two facts and start doing stuff like this. And that won't work because there is no parameter called minus conhost if you look at the help. This is where you got to start to be really careful. I'll also see folks do this. I mentioned this before. This is totally my fault because I call the commandlet get process. I don't call it get dash process, even though that's actually what it is. So be a little careful. Just make sure you're really paying attention to the syntax on these things so that you don't start making some of those mistakes. Where's the console? So we can run get process name conhost. Oops. We can, oh, there's two. Fascinating. We can omit the minus name and use this positionally, conhost. There we go. We can also truncate the parameter name. Now, truncating is not abbreviating. You don't get to make up an acronym or something. We're simply not typing the whole thing. You have to type enough that PowerShell can tell which parameter you met. So let's go back to the help on this real quick. And if I'm looking at the syntax, name starts with N, and nothing else starts with the letter N. So I'm betting I can do N conhost. Yeah, and that'll work because minus N is enough to uniquely identify the name parameter. And what if I wanted to do ID? Could I just put ID 2652? Do you think? Do you remember the help? Here's the three parameter sets. ID starts with an I, but input object also starts with an I. So I alone is not enough to make this unique. So I wonder what PowerShell's going to do. And you know what, as you're playing with this, hopefully you do have a lab environment. I will have students ask me all the time in class, well, what happens if I just run this with just minus I? I don't know. Hit enter. What's going to happen? Worst you're going to do is blow up your VM and have to start it over, right? It says, I cannot process the parameter because the name I is ambiguous. Did you mean minus ID or did you mean minus input object? Oh, so I have to type at least enough ID or minus IN to disambiguate, to make sure that I'm only picking one of those things. So that worked okay. Now, another thing we noticed in the full help get process minus full. Let's see if I can find it again. I think it was down here toward the notes. It is. You can also refer to this by the built-in aliases, PS and GPS. PS. Ooh, GPS. Now, these aliases do not change the command in any way, shape, or form. They are strictly a nickname for the command name itself. So PS minus name conhost still works. PS minus ID 2652 still works. GPS conhost using name as a positional still works. GPS minus I 2652 still don't work, and it gives you the same error message. Parameter name I is ambiguous. So the parameter is the same whether you're using the commandlet or the alias. That's super important. Talk about aliases for a sec, shall we? Get dash alias. Here's all the predefined aliases. You can make your own. For example, we know that dir is actually the command get child item. Yes? Now in the Unix world, you wouldn't use dir, you'd probably use ls. And that's another alias that PowerShell has defined, help ls, that points to this same command. So it's the same either way. When you run dir, you get the same parameters as if you had get child item. For example, in DOS, to get subdirectories, it's /s, That doesn't work here. It assumes that /s is a path, because in PowerShell, both a forward slash and a backward slash are used as path separators. So it was literally trying to look for CS as a directory, and it doesn't exist, and that's why we got the error. Take a look at this help for a second and see if you can figure out the parameter you would use to recurse subdirectories. Hopefully your eyes strayed over here to minus recurse. So dir is not the old DOS command. It's a PowerShell alias, and the underlying command works the same whether you use the command name or the alias name. There is not a Unix person in the world who would think that was cool. They'd look at that and go, that is not okay. That is not the ls command. And you're right, it's not. ls is just a shortcut to get child item. The command is get child item, and we're stuck using its syntax. But that will work. And I'm going to hit Control C because I do not feel like sitting here watching all that happen. Okay, so we've got a couple of these aliases out of the way. We've seen how to get a list of them all. Get alias. Now I'm going to do a new one. New alias. Name D, value, get child item. Now I can get a directory listing with one letter, and that means I win because the Unix guys have to use 2 letters, and they firmly believe there's a shortage of letters in the universe, and that's why all their commands are so tiny and short. But in PowerShell I can make my own. Fun trick. Close this. Open a new one. D. Nope. And look, my error text went back too. Went back to red. So every time you open a new shell window, you're getting a fresh PowerShell environment. You start from scratch. Later, we will talk about profiles, which allow you to do several of those things as the shell loads so that you get your customized environment each time. But for right now, you need to remember nothing is permanent. Now, folks might ask, is there a way that I can save my custom aliases to a file and then load them all back in bulk? To which I answer, why are you being so lazy? Get command, noun, alias. I already showed you get alias, so you know there's an alias noun, and this is how you find out that you can, in fact, export and import aliases. And I will leave you to play with those on your own. We're not going to cover them in great detail, but they're there, and you get to play with them. This is a good time for me to re-emphasize tab completion. Get pros tab. 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 In fact, you know one thing I don't understand? I don't understand why people truncate parameter names. If all you wanted to type was this, how hard is it to really just hit tab? Because, now look, if you're just at the command line, I don't care if you do this. Look, ps conhost is the same as get process name conhost. One of those, it's the second one, is a lot easier to read and figure out what it's doing. So if you're just going to be on the command line playing around, then I don't care if you use this because I'll never know. But when you go to copy and paste that into a script or into your blog or into something else that another human being has to look at, please give them the full version because it's a lot easier to understand. It's a lot more self-explanatory. And with that in mind, because I think nearly every command I'm going to run is eventually going to wind up in a script or in my blog, I tend to not do this very often, unless I'm just in a class and I'm trying to bang something out real quick and the command isn't the point. So, you know, tab completion, right? If this is too much to type, just do that. Let it type it for you. Name, conhost, computer name, localhost, right? You see how easy it goes if you just get used to using that tab button? It's pretty nice. I probably don't have the firewall turned off on in fact, I know the firewall is turned on this one, so this is going to fail miserably. That's nice. So start thinking about those things. Start getting the syntax right. Pay real close attention to the syntax. We're going to start doing more complicated commands, and as we do that, if you do one of these complicated multi-command one-liners and you get a syntax error or an error of any kind, the right thing to do is to go into a new shell window and start running each command individually to make sure you get the syntax right. PowerShell is very picky about the syntax. Let's look at some other things that people will try and do that it doesn't like very much. I'll get rid of the computer name since it's not going to do anything anyway. They'll do this. That's no good. Not a fan of that. They'll do this. Not good. It's not an equal sign. It's a space. Every single time. Now the help tells me that this accepts multiple values. And we already learned that commas are how you specify multiple values. So that's cool. If you want to put these in quotes, that's fine. But the comma is separating two values. The comma does not go inside the quotation marks if you're going to do this trick. You don't have to put these in any particular order, right? I can put computer name out here because I'm using named parameters. Once you use the parameter names, you can put them in any order you want to, and that's another reason to use the parameter names because you don't have to worry about getting the order right. So far we've been using PowerShell's built-in commands, commandlets. Let's talk about external commands. You guys remember ping, right? Ping localhost. Probably won't work because of the firewall. Yep. Oh no, it did. I must have an exception to allow that. And it's doing it on the IPv6 address. That's interesting. What about ipconfig? Remember that? So for the most part, PowerShell is capable of running all of your external commands, your traditional commands, the same way. There are some exceptions. We've got a nugget coming up in a little bit that's going to talk a little bit more about some of the trickier commands, because sometimes PowerShell will lose its head and it'll parse these things wrong and you won't get them to work right. So I'm going to show you tricks. But for your basic commands that don't have complicated parameters and arguments, PowerShell will work just fine. And one of the things I used to ask folks back in PowerShell version 2 days is say, okay, how do you use PowerShell to map a network drive? And then it'll kind of stare at me. And then some of the bright ones would do this. A new PS drive. And they would start going down that path and find out that that wouldn't map a drive in Windows Explorer. And I'd ask them again, how do you map a network drive? And someone would eventually get frustrated and they'd get that little vein bulging on their forehead and they'd go, well, if it wasn't for this, I'd just use NetUse. NetUse works fine. So the point of this is, don't kill yourself looking for a PowerShell way to do things if you already know a way that works. Right? If you already know that, well, in command.exe I would have done it this way, well, then try it that way. PowerShell's probably going to be okay with it. How do you display the ARP cache? ARP, right? All these external commands still work. So don't forget about them just because you're suddenly in a new shell. It's still a shell, and it still wants to use those command line tools. Just, give it a chance to do so. All right, so let's close this down and move on to the next bit, which will be Windows 8, so we can take a look at PowerShell 3. Now, there's not much here to show you. We've talked about really everything that you need. I just wanted to show you kind of an extra cool thing that version 3 and beyond does for you. Get process. First of all, this comes with so many more commands. I used to be in the habit of doing this, and I could hit tab and get process, and now not so much. It takes a lot longer to get there. So kind of sometimes you may need to give it a bit more. If you're on name and you start typing, it will tab complete some of these values for you. See, it's giving me everything with a C. If I do S, it'll go through all the S's. Every command has to be built to do this, because what this is doing is actually going and getting the list of services so that it knows what to spin through here when you're doing the tab completion. So some commands provide that for certain parameters. Not all commands provide it. Nobody provides that tab completion for all parameter values, but it is worth trying because sometimes it can make your typing life just a little bit easier. So it's just a little version 3 trick that I wanted you to know about before we moved on. And again, don't confuse that. Version 2 won't do that. Version 3 does. Not all commands, not all parameters, but when it does, it's certainly nice to have. In the ISE, this thing can actually make your life somewhat easier, because if I start typing a command, I still get my tab completion, but now I get a little pop-up menu, this IntelliSense, that helps me remember what the parameter names are. And then if it will complete the value for that parameter, it's going to give me that in a pop-up list as well. I think that's pretty cool. The other thing is, I showed you show command earlier. Well, that comes in this command tab for free. So check this out. If I start typing my command name over here, I get it. And then I can fill in the blanks right here. So let's say I wanted conhost. And then I can copy that to the clipboard or insert it right into the current command window over here. So that's the syntax created by this GUI. So this is kind of like that show command pop-up I showed you previously, but it's all integrated into this one environment. You will never see me use that again. It's a crutch. I don't mind people using a crutch, but eventually that leg is going to have to heal, and you are going to have to walk on it without the crutch, and you might as well start doing that now. So neat tricks, though, kind of cool things just to keep you honest and help make the syntax just a little bit easier. So even though some of this may have been repetitive for you, hopefully it helped you in the overall goal of getting the syntax right. And we did look more formally at using aliases. We talked about those parameter shortcuts, and I gotta re-emphasize, I really think as you get started, the right thing to do is to use names for all of your parameters. It will take some of the load off of you so that it's harder for you to do something wrong. And if you need to shortcut those parameters just so that you don't get carpal tunnel, then that's fine, do that. I also showed you a little bit about external commands. Now we're going to revisit that topic. We're not done with that yet. External commands can get a little tricky in PowerShell, and what you do to fix the tricks changes in different versions. So we're definitely going to be coming back to that in an upcoming nugget. I also looked at some of the common gotchas, and I really hope that that can help you avoid those gotchas since you know about them. Hopefully you can be looking for them too. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.